Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. Happy Friday to all of you. Hope you had a great week so far. For today's project, we are going to be leveling up some Dollar Tree greeting cards. This is something that I like to do every year. Sometimes it's a boxed greeting card or just a regular Dollar Tree greeting card so that you can see the beautiful elements on these cards can be redesigned into your original handmade cards. So I've got two different styles here. We're going to go one that's a little bit more simple and then one that is a little bit more my style with some additional layering elements and flowers. So I hope that you enjoy this tutorial. Stick with me and we will make these together. Okay, so the first question you might be asking is, why would you take a perfectly nice greeting card and level it up into a handmade creation? And I can answer that very easily. Is there are a lot of beautiful design elements on these cards. I think they're nice just as they are, and I would have no trouble sending them. But if you look at all of the different components that make up the designs of these cards, you can see removing them and then redesigning it into a handmade creation. And so I was only able to have time to check through the Slimline card rack. I'm sure there are tons of other ones in the more traditional sizes, but you can see that I have large elements here, some kinds of trims. The card I picked for the first project for our video today had a lot of foiling on it and beautiful glittery accents, and so I'm thinking in my head, I have $1 to spend on this card. That will save me a great amount of time when I'm actually designing my card because all of those accented areas are already there. So what I want to do is break these down into the individual components so that I can work with it more like ephemera or some die cuts. And so these are two of the cards I have left that I haven't cut into. I just wanted to mention one more thing about these cards. For some reason, this brand has an image on the back that is similar to the front. And when we get to our first card, I will show you how I utilized that for a continuation of that project. And then there are also some nice sentiments on the inside. So if you are able to utilize those as well, that's just a better value for your $1 because you have more things to create with. These also come with envelopes, and so for my cards, I'm not using the Slimline profile, but I might as well hang on to these because I can use them for future projects. So my first card is not quite a Slimline profile, but it was quite large, so I thought I would hang on to this one as well. So I'm going to get a little bit of extra value for that Dollar Tree card. And then another use that I have for those Slimline Dollar Tree cards is to utilize them in my traveler notebooks for my documenting December. Now I'm really late on the game for these. This is going to be my 2020 album and I'm only just sort of starting it, so I've only got little rings in here and it isn't quite big just yet, but it will be eventually. And so I really loved the kitschy holiday retro vibe of this card, and so even though it didn't fit quite exactly, I was able to clip it down. I rounded the corners just so that it would look nice, and then the elements that were already here were so perfect to fill this space. All I had to do was add my 2020, and then later on I'll come in and add some trims to my rings. And this is just an easy way to cover the front of this card. I absolutely loved this kind of kitschy wreath here with the little squish bow, and it just reminded me of a 50s kind of card that you might find in a vintage store. And so I'm going to utilize that for the cover of my 2020 Documenting December. So let's get into our card for today. Like I mentioned earlier, if you are able to utilize the insert that has the sentiment, then you're going to get even a better value for that $1 card. And because this card had a very gold foil accent, I just chose to continue working with gold. So I use that for my matting. So before I get started, I did want to show you what the card looked like when I started working with it before I cut all the elements apart. And I only picked up one of each of these cards, so I thought I would just share this picture that I took before I started. So this had a beautiful blue wintry background. The trees are glittery. It had a very sweet sentiment, and so I wanted to make sure to incorporate that. The little house, the little church here is absolutely precious. It's raised and it has the foil details on it, so definitely worth getting all of these elements from my Dollar Tree card. So in order to get it to fit, I did wind up removing this sentiment, and then I trimmed it down around all of the sides. And so the remaining parts I'm going to reassemble and make it a more handcrafted and dimensional card. And so this was my first one. Now let's work on our card using those elements. And so I decided to pull the blue from the background. This is the piece that I cut off. You can see where the sentiment had started out. And I picked out a low contrasting, very small blue pattern that I knew would coordinate with that background. It's a very wintry scene and it's lovely. And so I'm gonna keep using my gold cardstock and just layer on this 5 by 6.5 inch card. So even though we're adding layers, it's still a standard size card. So here's the base, and I'm going to add a raised section. So here is another gold cardstock border, and I did put this up on a foam spacer. I've got to do a couple of layering bits before I can add it to the card, and I'm going to bring back in the portion of the card. You can see how all those windows are foiled and the trees are beautiful and glittery. And so this is just going to go to the top of this raised portion. So I'm not going to give you guys measurements for these specific cards because Dollar Tree has such a variety of cards, and not everywhere has everything available. So you're going to have to decide when you find your cards what will work best for you. So this did previously have the trees on top, and you can see how much I cut from the sides to get it to fit into that raised portion. But I stopped at the top of the cross because I did want to make sure that was included. And so in the original card, there was also a second snowy hillside border. I don't know if you can see that as well, that were under the deer. I do feel a little bad about not getting to use the deer, but they just did not work when I used the sentiment in another location. So we're going to have to let that go. But I did save the snowy hillside border, and I'll show you in a bit what I'm going to use that for. But because all of this beautiful foiling was so special, I decided to pull a foiled cardstock. So this is just a diagonal stripe, and I'm going to finish off the bottom of this card with that stripe, and it just kind of tucks underneath that church. Remember I said that it was a dimensional element, and so I'm just going to slip that underneath the raised portion of that church. And now you can see that it does coordinate with the beautiful foiling. And I'll also bring back my sentiment in. So this already had that beautiful metallic kind of organza ribbon, and the sentiment is foiled again, has more of a ephemera shape to it. I popped that up on some spacers just to give it a little bit more dimension, and I'm going to add it here at the bottom, and I'm going all the way down as far as I can so that it's mostly contained within this raised section and doesn't cover too much of the bottom of the church. So now we've just taken our sentiment and moved it from the top down to the bottom. And then I'm going to wrap the ribbon around this whole section and capture it in between the base of the card and this raised area so that it will be nice and secure. And so I'm just going to adhere it to my double-sided adhesive tape. And then because this is foam and a little bit heavy, I do want to come back in with a little bit of my Tombow just to make sure that that will be well secured. And so this is just going to be mostly working with the elements for the card. I'm not adding a lot of embellishments. We'll do that for our next card. But this is just so sweet and full of beautiful detail. I didn't want to cover any of it with foliage or flowers. I think it's just really special just how it is. And so I'm going to center that raised portion so you get a nice border of our blue background paper. And this is the card. It's just absolutely stunning. And because we put the spacers in and the additional layers of pattern paper, it really has a much more handmade appeal to it. It's much more grand than a regular Dollar Tree card. And I think it's really nice that I was able to incorporate the sentiment that was inside as well. So I did mention earlier that these cards have the additional imagery on the back of the card. And so I just went ahead and I cut that out with the tag die that I love that has the stitched border. I'm going to add this to the blue cardstock that matches, and so I think this would be a nice kind of combo. If you're gifting someone something, you could have your sentiment inside the card and then use this tag as your gift tag. And I used some of the additional pieces of that foiled cardstock, and I've just cut that out with my tag die again so that I could maintain that stitch border all the way around and have all that nice detail. Remember I mentioned that there were some snowy borders left over, so I just went ahead and cut that with my tag die as well. So I've got my stitch lines here. I'm going to put this, I'm just going to cover a little bit of the bottom of that deer because I need all of these elements to work together in the design. But here's the bottom portion. I'll just go ahead and line that up. So now you have a matching gift card that goes with your greeting card. And I think all you have to do really is punch a hole here and put some pretty twine through. But now you can see that you have a matching set. And so $4, I think this was an excellent value, and I was able to get through some of my stash paper. So that's always a win. So this is the first card. Okay, so for the second card, I'm going to level this up even further and put more of my own personal card making style in. And so this is another one of the slimline cards from the Dollar Tree. I'm going to change the profile of this down into a 6x6 card. And I really love how you can take a lot of the elements as inspiration. So this particular image from the card has a really sweet kind of coffee or cocoa effect, and so I'm pulling my colors out of here and the style of paper to decide what other elements I'm going to be bringing in to pair it with. And so the first thing I want to do is add a base. Now you'll see there is a giant oval cut out of this pattern paper. I only had enough to do the inside and the cover and not some additional pieces, but I did want to bring this neutral up to the top of the card, so when I add my coffee or cocoa drink, you can see the whipped cream on the top. And so what I did was I took the die that I'll be using as my scalloped oval accent on the top. I just traced around the inside of that largest die, and then I cut that out so that I can bring that pattern up to the top. So let's just add this to the front of the card. And this time, because we're using a more of a gingerbread theme, I thought that the red cardstock would coordinate perfectly. And for the layers that are on top, I am going to be utilizing this Echo Park paper pad. This is Gingerbread Christmas, so it coordinates perfectly. I do also have a raised section, and this time I'm just going to build on here and then add it to my card base. Here's those sweet little gingerbreads, and I think they're adorable. I actually really love gingerbread because it has the nice warm seasonal spices. Let me know in the comments if you like gingerbread as well, or spiced cookies. So this would typically be how I would be building my regular cards, and I would normally put my pattern paper on the bottom. But for this card, I'm going to use this on the side, and this is just cut to utilize the same border, so I can just go ahead and add that here. Here is that die cut that I mentioned. I used just a nice white cardstock because I need to break up some of that busy paper pattern in the back. And here is that portion that I cut out of my snowflake pattern, and I'm just going to add that right to the middle, and this is going to be a better, more neutral base. So I'll go ahead and pull the tape, and I'll just go ahead and add this to the center of my card base. Okay, so that's our first layer of dimension, and I also put my foam tabs behind this cup. So I've been searching for a coffee to-go cup die forever, and I've not really found the one that I really like, so I was very happy to find this card. Remember, I said this was a slimline card profile, and this cup did have a bottom portion that was similar to these hearts, but I needed to remove the additional elements from this so that I could move them into a separate area. So I wound up just clipping that where the white border is, and then I can utilize the other elements as layering pieces. And so I'm really gonna put this very close to the top because I want to make sure to leave room on the bottom for my flower elements. And now you can see how neutralizing that busy background paper really helped to make a focal point of that whipped cream. So this is very glittery. I don't know how to hold that so you can see it as well. And so that's just a added layer that came with the card. I think if you were to create a coffee cup, if you had the die and all the paper and put on the accents, it would be worth it to you to buy all this for $1 and then just cut them back out. So that is what I did. And this is another portion of the card. It doesn't fit here because I don't have room for it, but I just clipped that out with a dovetail banner die so I can use that for another project. So I'm going to bring in those additional elements that I removed. Remember, I said there was a couple things that I cut off of the bottom. And so now I can bring them up here and use them as additional details. This portion of the cup is also on a spacer, but there's a little bit of room. So I want to tuck in my little gingerbread and this extra candy cane here, and I'll just put a little Tombow on the back and then slide that under, and that will be well secured. So this is just the sweetest way to get that extra detailing without having to do additional work. And this guy has another one of those little satin bows, so that is bringing more texture and detail. Putting a little glue on the back, and then we'll slide that under and have him hanging out like he's part of this drink treat. Okay, I want to add a couple of charms, and because we have candy canes, I decided to go with those again, and a little gift package here. So I'll add this as I always do, putting it into a little hot glue to secure the strings. Remove the excess. And then I'll cover those cut threads with a vintage button. So because I don't have room for one large floral embellishment, I'm going to add 2 small arrangements here. And so normally I would want to put green with red poinsettias, but the green foiling in here is a very specific color, and it was also pretty shiny. So I decided that the gold mirror cardstock would coordinate with the cup hugger. I don't know exactly what you call that, just to keep the heat from your hands. And so the gold foil actually matches that pretty well, so I decided to use that. So there's just my regular netting, a loopy twine bow, a couple of berries here, and then 2 smaller poinsettias. And I want to just add them one on either side to balance out that cup. So I want to add a couple of my sequins here as well, just as a nice final detail. So I'm going to put 2 on to the whipped cream and then 1 down onto the card base. And then I'll add those with my Tombow. Okay, so that's all for my 2 styles of leveled up Dollar Tree greeting cards. I hope I inspired you to go to the Dollar Tree and have a look at some of the ready-made cards to see if they will be good to get some elements to use in your own handmade greeting cards. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, make sure that you give me a big thumbs up, leave me a comment, and if you're not already, I would love for you to subscribe. Remember, you can find links to all of our social media sites in the description below. And as always, I'm wishing you a happy and productive day. And thank you so much for watching. Bye.